Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Coach's Corner presented by On Track College Advising. I'm thrilled to have Tyler Wingard from Christopher Newport University with us today. Tyler was actually responsible for hiring me in my first coaching role at Valparaiso University, where he served as the head track and field coach at the time. After the 2025 season, he left Valpo and took a job at Christopher Newport University, where he remains the director of track and field and cross country. Over his career at CNU, he's been named the Mason-Dixon's Men and Women's Coach of the Year on multiple occasions. Over the last 2 years, his entire staff was named the Coast to Coast Athletic Conference Staff of the Year, and 11 times he's been recognized as the Southeast Regional Coach of the Year by the U.S. Track and Field and Cross Country Coaches Association. He continues to remain one of my close friends and mentor of mine. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to connect.
Absolutely. It's great to be here and great to help out your new project here.
Appreciate that. So you've had a long, successful career in collegiate athletics. Can you tell us a bit about your journey as a student athlete at Oxy and include some of the stops at PLU and Valpo before getting to CNU?
Sure. I was counting up earlier today thinking about this, and I think this is starting my 34th year of coaching this year. The coaching side started back with my dad. He's was a Hall of Fame level cross country and track and field coach out in Washington State, high school level. So I've been around coaching from a very young age. Been around coaching at a high level from a young age, which has been great. So a lot of the things that even the way that I thought of being an athlete was a little bit more through a coach's lens than probably a lot of my teammates growing up. But yeah, as you mentioned, I went to Occidental College out in LA. Had a couple of other outstanding mentors there, just in kind of how you think about organizing your program. And again, growing up as a coach's kid, that was evident. That was one of the things I was kind of looking at and thinking about. And it's like, okay, well, why do we make these decisions, those decisions? Coach Bill Harvey out there had a tremendous tenure at Occidental. Some of the things that I'm doing today, cross training and understanding how to, we're thinking about how to dissect even distance training in similar ways that you kind of break down field event training and so on, there are certain places to work on certain things and think about where it's most efficient to get it done. Do those things there. Don't pick the inefficient way to achieve some other task that you want to get across. So, he was a great resource, great person to learn from. Started teaching and coaching at the high school level. My dad was one of the early cohorts through USA Track and Field's coaching education. So he encouraged me to get rolling on that as soon as I started coaching. So I've been doing coaching ed, attending, and then actually got a chance to work with the USA Track and Field's coaching education program with their executive committee. Taught a bunch of level 1 and level 2 schools for a while. All of that as I'd coached high school for a few years. Coached part-time at Pacific Lutheran University for a few years, learned how to recruit at PLU, actually kind of was created and pushed into a recruiting coordinator position there. And that ultimately is what opened the door for me to get the job at Valparaiso. Spent 6 years there from 2000 to 2006. And then the opportunity arose to come out here to Christopher Newport and follow up another Hall of Famer. And actually the women's coach of the first 25 years of the women's NCAA, that's the guy I'm following up out here. So still trying to fill those shoes. Need a few dozen more pairs of socks and some wadded newspaper and stuff to be able to do that. But yeah, starting up my 20th year out here and very, very different traditions and very different resources at each of the stops along the way. So that's offered lots of great challenges to figure out how to help our student athletes be successful in just a variety of different situations.
So what initially drew you to coaching track and field? I mean, obviously your dad was a huge influence there, but specifically working with those college student athletes.
So track and field was that was a decision that was helped by my high school soccer coach. When I came back, lived in England for a year, came back my sophomore year of high school, played soccer since I was taller than the ball, just barely. And Washington State boys soccer and track and field are both spring sports. So I had to make a decision. and the back and forth with the soccer coach. One of the things that I think kind of the final bit of advice he gave me is like, the great thing about track and field is when you're ready to go, you can go. You don't have to wait for 10 other guys to figure it out along with you. I still miss playing soccer, and I still think, once in a while, if I would have gone that route, would I have followed a similar path and just been a soccer coach now as opposed to track and field coach? But teaching and coaching is, kind of always what I've envisioned myself doing. I knew the high school level because of my dad. I was, that's where I started professionally, and had a lot of fun coaching at that level. Had some opportunities to continue training and competing myself. Ended up connecting with an old buddy of mine who was coaching at Pacific Lutheran University. Shifted my training over there. So a javelin thrower, so you can't just pop into a random location and start chucking spears around and and expect not to have consequences. But got the opportunity to train there, so got to know their staff, got to know their squad, and so on. And a position opened up the next year, and so they invited me to help out on the staff, and just kind of kept following that along.
So you've been at CNU since '06. What's kept you there so long, and what do you enjoy most about coaching that program?
It's honestly been a lot of challenges. When I got here, I mean, coming from Valparaiso, which at the time was low on facilities, we had to make do on a lot of things. Throwing the weight on an auxiliary basketball court. I mean, hoping no one's going to throw it through a backboard, which they didn't while I was coaching there.
Hey,
But coming to Christopher Newport, which built an 200-meter indoor Mondo track in 2000, which is one of the best facilities in the region out here when it was put in. It still was when I got here. So all the high schools were coming to our meets. All the colleges in the region were coming to our meets. And really nice outdoor stadium that we got to kind of reimagine and rebuild the track out there to make it a really first-rate facility. And the department as a whole is very compete at the highest level and focus. Top to bottom, all the programs are expected to do that. There's that just fit really well with if you're going to do something, do it really well.
yeah.
And there was support for it. One of my good friends and fellow coaches and mentors and so on, Warren is like, no matter where you are, you're always going to want something more, want more and so on. And that's 100% true for all the things that we have. I'm still dogging my athletic director and saying, hey, we need this, we need that, we need these other things. But, it's what we do have is more than enough. One of the things I try and do as a coach and teach my staff to do is like, there are things that we're going to push to advance things and ask for more and want for more, but we don't want our athletes to feel like they're wanting for more and needing more. Make sure that they feel like they have everything they need to have all the success that they want to have. If it does feel like something's a little bit short, then it's our job as coaches to be better and more creative and find ways to allow them to achieve regardless of the circumstances. And you carried that on at Valpo, and the same that I did there. Is like, well, we don't have a track, we don't have throwing facilities for the most part. We don't have any sandboxes to jump into, and pole vaulting on a hardwood floor. All those things, and yet
Balls are flying across the gym.
yeah, well, basketballs and stuff. But our student athletes came in, and we were honest with them about, this is what we have, this is where we train, this is how we're going to put it together, and this is the work that you need to do to achieve the results that you want. And we help them churn out PR after PR after PR, and not just little incremental improvements, but big transformational improvements as athletes, and more importantly as people. We got to teach some really good lessons about there's what you have, what you want, what you need, and those aren't all precisely the same things. But ultimately, if you want to achieve something, your job is to figure out how to achieve it. And learn and develop that skill. And as a teacher and a coach, when you see that skill learned and developed in our student athletes and see them really start to understand it and see that they can do it on their own now, that's just the best feeling in the world.
So your program, I mean, you're achieving at the regional level, at the national level, success across the board there, including those conference championships. I mean, you've got All-Americans coming through there. What are the core values of your coaching philosophy that help contribute to that success? Because
Same
in
same
my
ones
belief
that
is
I
that a head coach or the coaching staff really does help drive that forward. So create that environment. So what are those things for you?
Yeah, so it's really not anything different than what I had when I was at Valparaiso and what we worked on. And the wording was work hard, be a good teammate, pursue important goals. If you're doing those things, then we probably had a spot for you. And while you were there, we're going to teach you how to work harder. We're going to teach you, how to be a better teammate, raise the level of the goals that you're considering and pursuing over the course of 26 years as a head coach, program director. The athletes change, the way they hear things changes, and so on. So, we've got a few different versions: commitment, accountability, purpose. Is beginning of being a captain, CAP. So that's find different ways to explain the same values that we're trying to get across that hopefully continue to evolve along with the cohorts of student athletes that we have coming through so that it makes sense to them, it resonates with them, and they can attach to it and move forward with this. But it's really that simple. It's you have to be, everyone likes to talk about the things that they want to do and want to accomplish, and there's a lot of psychology, a lot of different psychologies that go into, how those are going to be formulated and which ones we want to admit to and which ones we kind of keep to ourselves and so on. But that purpose, that target is what establishes the kind of path that you're going to be learning how to follow. So, we really have to start with being afraid to dream big. Don't be afraid to put down a ridiculous goals. But when you do, you just have to understand that that's not the end of it, right?
Yeah.
If you're a high school freshman, running track for the first time, someone handed you a shot put and it dropped it on your toe, but somehow, you want to be an Olympian, you want to be part of that. Like, well, that's not a bad thing to think about. It is only going to be useful if you think about, well, what does that mean? And what version of me would be able to achieve that outcome? And then really start digging into, we use that specific language. Like, you need to think about what version of you can accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. So you're not, looking at, um, Cantwell or whoever
Yeah.
is like,
Making those crazy
all I have to
comparisons.
do is, change my entire body and and
Grow
and
6 inches.
lineage, yeah, all those other things. But you start looking at what version of me does that. So then that gives you something specific to work on. And as you go through that process, then a lot of times most of us are going to realize, yeah, I'm not quite enough of a freak to be an Olympian, but I can do some things down the line that seem equally as ridiculous relative to where I am right now.
Yeah. Still be able to produce at that high level.
Yeah, and in that process, the it's not the goal, it's the journey is a terrible quote. It's terrible advice. It's awful. It is true. It's 100% true, but it's bad advice. It's a bad advice to give to people because too often that's it. That's where they stop. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's really not if I ever achieve this. It's just as long as I try. Well, if you don't have a destination, there is no journey,
Right.
right? So you don't get to that point where you have to decide whether to turn left or turn right, and there's a reason to make one of those choices. One of those choices is going to get you closer to the destination, and one of those choices isn't. How do you make that decision if you don't know where you're trying to go? And it's those decisions. That's the part that's valuable about the journey, is learning how to consider and make those decisions, and then also recognize when you made the wrong decision and how to backtrack or course correct or whatever. But none of that actually happens, and there's no value to that process unless there's a particular outcome that we're trying to go to that's driving the decisions and giving you a way to evaluate, whether you're making good decisions or bad decisions, or distracting decisions or whatever. Yeah. So that's, so we start there, and then, or as much as my soccer coach said, you don't have to wait around for 10 other guys. It's true. You can be a star track and field cross country athlete without any decent teammates at all. But man, is it easy to do well when you've got a lot of good teammates, you know? So we've always been team focused. And, at the college level, as you know, you're pulling people in from lots of different program philosophies. So there's a lot of teaching. It's like, yep, that worked really well for your program in high school. That's fantastic. You're here now. This is how we do it. So we're going to teach you the what's and whys and all of that. We need you to be a good student and join in on it, and making it seeing it as a team sport, understanding that, your not just your success or failure affects your teammates, but your demeanor, your interactions with them, all of those things have extraordinarily important impacts on everybody else around you. So being a great teammate, not just being a good teammate, but learning how to be a great teammate is vitally important. And in the real world, there are very few things that you do totally in isolation anyway. And then, in that environment, commitment, accountability, all of that is part of being that great teammate, part of following that path to the destination that you're seeking, and learning how to make better and better choices, and so on. It's not I can turn it on and turn it off. It's no, you got to be thinking about it all the time, not with blinders on, but the opposite, with blinders off and seeing everything, because then you start to realize that everything's interconnected. What's going on in your social life is going to affect what's going on in your academic life, which is going to affect what's going on in your athletic life, which is going to affect everything else. So then you start to understand how important it is to be really mindful of the whole big picture, so that you can really dial in and focus on the details, the fine details within that picture.
So you guys have had, remarkable number of school records that you've broken, or that you've had broken in your program over your time there. What do you attribute that to? Is it primarily about recruiting the talent? Is it about developing the talent, or is it a combination?
So one of the taglines that we pull up every once in a while in our cold letters out to recruits, and we talk about it during the process, is there are definitely programs that collect talent. They work really, really hard on recruiting. They look at your numbers, they look at your capabilities, and if you're good, you're going to get a letter from them. You're going to get a scholarship offer from them. They're going to try and hoard you and put you on their roster, and then they're going to go out and find more people like that. And there are definitely programs that fall into the trap of, it's so hard to collect high-level talent that consumes the program. And once you get there, I mean, it's great. You're surrounded by a whole bunch of other really talented people, and there's going to be growth and development in that atmosphere just by osmosis. But our focus has always been on, it's like, yeah, we're going to do our job recruiting, and we want the best possible people in here who are a good fit for the university, so that whole picture is going to work out well for them. But we work on developing it, and it's the physical side, all the different pieces, the strength, the coordination, the balance, the speed. It's the psychological side. It's, the confidence, the ability to refocus, the ability to prepare for the eventualities of a long day's competition, or a long season's competition, or careers competition, up and downs with injuries and all the rest of it. And the other things, we already talked about, the recognizing the balance, and, how much is on my plate, and, at what point do I need to, am I just being greedy and putting more stuff on my plate because I can, but then find out that, well, I'm not actually enjoying any of these things. I'm not doing well with any of them because there's just too much there. And, so all of that goes in. And it's probably why I've stayed at the college level, and appreciate this work at the college level, even though I grew up kind of idolizing the high school coaching atmosphere and so on. Is that collegiate student athletes, they're especially, we're a residential campus, so they're on their own for the first time. They're figuring out who they are as people. So there's a lot of growth and discovery and so on. And it's great to kind of be there along with them on that path. And then using something that is already familiar to them, where they've kind of learned, it's like, well, you do have to put some effort in, and there is a return on those investments when you are willing to make better decisions about your diet, about your sleep, about that. When you're willing to push yourself a little bit further, when you're having conversations with your teammates, how to motivate them and how to draw energy from them and so on. Those are all familiar templates as they're coming into college, and then seeing that as, okay, so this is how it works over here too, and it works over in the other parts of your lives and stuff. So that's I think I'm pretty good at following tangents, and maybe that sounds like, oh well, it's just kind of the growth of the person. Well, that's how you get people to transform the levels of performance.
Yeah.
We just graduated a discus thrower who was an all American first team and second team. Ended up throwing, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 160 feet in the discus. She was a 107-foot discus thrower coming in. Our throws coach, who's in I think this was his 8th year with us. He's done a tremendous job on that. We've had sprinters that, graduate 2 or 3 seconds faster in the 400 than when they walked in the door.
Yeah.
We had a women's 4x4 that went back to nationals. So they wouldn't have qualified this year. D3 is getting a little tougher, but about 10 years ago, they ran 3:48 at nationals. Only one of them ran sub 60 in high school.
Well,
So
maybe that's, you're leading into my next question. I mean, how's the landscape of D3 changed since you began there? Like, what are some of those biggest challenges and opportunities that you see?
yeah, so COVID kind of put collegiate athletics on its head a little bit, and then all the lawsuits and stuff that have been going through have done so even more. So the COVID effect largely was because of all the disruptions. The NCAA felt that there were going to be lots of exceptions that needed to be made for athletes whose careers and opportunities were disrupted by school closures and everything that went on with that during the pandemic. And rather than trying to evaluate each individual, which was already in the books, there's lots of things that can happen that you can ask for a waiver to extend not count one of your years or whatever. So all that was already in place. Basically what COVID did was like, well, now everybody's affected by this. So rather than trying to deal with those individually, felt the best thing to do was just give a blanket waiver to everybody, depending on what part of the country you're in and what opportunities your college or university had. I think last year was the last year of the COVID bubble. The last year that someone could graduate looking back, it's like, well, I got to do extra seasons because my first seasons were disrupted by COVID. And it was, timing wise, it affected 2 years worth of athletics. So we end up with, everyone has already heard of redshirt seniors, 5th-year seniors, and so on. That was a fairly normal thing. Well, now we got 7th-year seniors because 2 of the years were disrupted. And on the recruiting side, like, well, no one's competing in high school either. So you've got roster spots that are being held by people who are able to stick around longer. So there aren't as many spots opening up at the for scholarship slots. And then you start looking at the high school kids. It's like, well, they haven't done anything in 2 years. So how do you evaluate whether they're the right person you want to invest a scholarship in? A lot of athletes just didn't have the opportunity to demonstrate their growth and development to the point where they were given a scholarship offer at Division I or Division II. And Division III is non-scholarship. Most places don't have roster limitations as a result, and there are lots of great coaches and great programs at the Division III level, same as at Division II and Division I. So there were high-level programs and coaches there for those athletes who in previous years would have gotten a scholarship to compete at the Division I level. Well, they didn't get that opportunity coming out of COVID, so they ended up at Division III schools. And you mix that in with and this is a broad brushstroke on this, and is not accurate at the individual program level, because there are championship programs and there are participation programs in Division One, Division Two, and Division Three. But if there's some weight to where the coaches who are really, really good at developing athletes, they tend to be more in the Division Three ranks than the high school ranks, because the Division One level is like you're dealing with elite athletes already. It's not that they're not developing them, but there's a different kind of development that's going on at that level, because there's just different factors to consider at that level. But when you come into a program where the coaches have figured out how to get 50 52-second 400-meter runners to run 48s, and you come in as a 49-second or 48 high 400-meter runner, you're working on some things. And generally speaking, the difference between the high school 54 kid and 49 kid, or the 61 kid versus the 57 kid, it's like they're still high school athletes. One's more talented than the other generally, has different strength profiles and so on, but they still have the same kinds of technical flaws. They still have the same growth and maturity opportunities that all college age student athletes do within various bandwidths and so on. So now we're tossing these kids into the hands of coaches who have always had to really, really focus on how do we get people to be a lot better, and they got a lot better.
Yeah, they're figuring it out.
So that that raised the level coming out of COVID. With the first year we had nationals coming out of COVID felt pretty normal. The next year's on, it's like, oh my goodness, there's some people here that haven't been here before, and this is this is another level. And there's a little bit of, it's like, all right, well, once the COVID bubble bursts, then we'll get back to we'll be back to normal and stuff. And so then we inject the super shoes, and we inject the transfer portal, and now we've injected roster limits for revenue sharing, and I don't know if that's going to change. And that's we've already seen the impact on the kinds of questions that our recruits are asking us, the kinds of recruits who are interested in coming on official visits, knowing that we're Division III, knowing they're not going to get a scholarship here. But they're hearing and they're starting to see that the opportunities at the Division I and even Division II level to get one of those scholarship slots is getting more difficult.
Yeah, uber competitive.
Because there's been an elevation in performance. We're a couple of generations into coaching education now, so the coaches who are coaching now were coached by coaches who went through a really good, robust coaching education program. So that's elevated the coaching profession, which helps elevate the performance level. So that piece is in there. But now, if you've got a roster limit, one of my fellow coaches here in Virginia at a mid-major D1 has basketball, so they're opting in on the revenue sharing, and he had to tell his men's team that with the roster limitations, that would only leave him 2 slots for the next recruiting class. He said, I can't have a recruiting class of 2, so 8 of you are not going to be on the team next year. And so now those athletes are now grandfathered in, so there's some a little bit of relief on that, but it did cause a lot of chaos until that was in. So everyone's in the transfer portal, and now with the transfer portal, it's like if I'm LSU or I'm University of Virginia or whomever, I have however many slots the university and the department has allowed me to have between 0 and the maximum. It's my job to produce national championship team trophies. Am I going to take a high school kid who's really talented, performs really well, but hasn't made the transition to college yet? And that's a tough transition on everybody.
Yeah.
Or do I go find someone in the portal who's already done well at the college level, has already made that transition, and get them with equal marks or maybe even a little bit better marks? It's like, it doesn't make sense not to consider that transfer portal kid is the better investment.
Sure.
So
yeah,
and every program's got to figure that out. But so now, every one of those programs that does look at the transfer portal is like, I'm not going to bother with freshmen unless they, really wow us to, we're gonna live in the transfer portal. Like, well, that's one more program that's not recruiting high school kids anymore. So where are those kids going to go to have the opportunity to get in the transfer portal and move up? And that's kind of what's happening. And they're going to end up at the smaller D1 schools, the D2 schools, the Division 3 schools, and we're going to see a lot more transfer up kind of stuff that it's just going to keep the competition levels at, pretty high at all the way through. Also change is gonna it's not gonna change anybody's philosophies, but it's gonna change how we implement those and apply those to the circumstances that we're in.
So how do you approach recruiting then, right? What qualities are you looking for in those PSAs, and what type of student is going to thrive at CNU?
Well, at CNU, thrive at CNU is the biggest filter. And I've been fortunate that my collegiate coaching career at Pacific Lutheran, at Valparaiso, and here at CNU, all three are outstanding institutions, and all three do really, really well for a particular clientele. The first two, top level Lutheran universities. Christopher Newport's a state school, even though it looks like a private school when you're walking around, and we're 5,000 students, so we're still kind of mid-size in there, small classrooms and all that. But it has, there's a certain set of opportunities and a culture and an atmosphere on campus and expectations that the professors and the university as a whole has about the life of the students on campus that is primary in the recruiting process. So, so first and foremost, it's, do you have the grades? Are you interested in the majors that we have to offer? Are your second or third option majors, or do we have those as well? Because there aren't that many students who come in, this is what I want to do, and when they graduate, it's still what they want to do. But making sure that all of those are set up, making sure that the atmosphere on campus is something that suits them well. When I was at Valpo, we didn't do a ton of official visits. We were very much a regional university, so we're pulling people from the upper tier of the United States and didn't have a lot of money for recruiting, didn't have a lot of money for anything else either. But flying a bunch of kids in for official visits just wasn't something that we could do. We're, as much as we have the potential to be a regional footprint university here at CNU, we're still a state school, so most of our kids come from within the state. So we do a lot more official visits here because kids are driving in and their parents are coming down and so on. And it's easier to show off, this is the campus. And we get them down during the school year so they can walk around and see how the other students are interacting with each other. Our admission staff had the brilliant idea several years ago, whether it was their own or if they borrowed it from someone else. Even borrowing good ideas is just as brilliant as coming up with them yourself. But prospective students do their admission interviews. Those admission interviews are with our recent alumni. They're going to be with people who graduated in the last year or two from the university, and so they get a chance to actually interact with those, as peers, and can give the senior staff in the admission office a little bit of feedback about, I think they'd fit in pretty well here, or this is going to be they're going to find they're going to be one of those people that we're worried about the whole time they're coming through, that just doesn't necessarily show up in the numbers and stuff on the transcripts and the essays and all that kind of thing. So all of that is, when I first got here and talked with our admission staff and the rest, I was like, well, how do you need, what kind of help do you need? Is, how many waivers, how many exceptions are you going to be begging us? And it's like, well, I really got to get this kid. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to have you tell me, we don't know if this kid's a good fit, and then have me come around. I was like, I want him here anyway. That's just not going to happen. Like, if they're not a good fit, they're not going to do well here. They need to be someplace else. I'm going to help them go someplace else where they're going to be successful overall, because you're going to have your best success where the environment suits you best. So as a result, easier to do in track and field. It's like, I can just go through. It's like, well, here are certain this is the performance level that it takes to be competitive at conference level, and let's send out 2,000 letters and see how many bites we get. And Really, it's a process, and my whole staff is on board with this. It's we describe it, share it, and live it as our job recruiting to our program is to help the prospective student athlete figure out if CNU is the best fit for them. And if it is, then we know that they're going to do well. They're going
Yeah.
to do well here performance wise. If it's not, they might do well, but they're more likely to not, because when we push them, when things get difficult, they're not going to be in the environment that says this is worth it.
Yeah.
So we, that's worked pretty well for me. I mean, it's not a universal recruiting style. Not everyone sees it and does it that way. And, there are definitely some, highly talented people who, really liked my staff, who we kind of actively said is like, yeah, this is just not going to be where you're going to have your best success. So, we'd love to have you. You'd be an All-American for us for sure, and maybe a national champion. But,
Good for you. I don't
you know,
think that's an easy task to turn someone away when you see that they're, as talented as they are, but you still know that, hey, they're going to choose this school for maybe one reason, and that's not enough to keep them there. And honestly, that's something I talk to the students that I work with all the time about is you got to choose it for more than just athletics alone, because it's not a given that it's going to be there forever. So injury
yep,
happens, all those other things too. So,
yep,
but as a coach sitting in the other seat, on the other side of the table, I think a lot of them, they want to give you, whatever you need to hear in order to get you there. And sometimes they don't take that into account. And so
yeah,
it's good.
yeah. I mean, it's easy, and when you read the articles on recruiting strategies and so on, probably every collegiate coach is subscribed in or automatically gets letters from one recruiting service or a dozen or whatever. And, a lot of the advice in there is pulled right out of the sales world. This is
Yeah.
how you get somebody, this is how you get someone to yes. This is how you get someone to choose to buy your item instead of somebody else's item.
Yeah.
And I think, there's value and there's insight because we are navigating an 18-year-old's mind coupled with their parents' mind, and it may
Hmm.
be their first kid that's going off to school or their last one or whatever. There's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of anxieties, there's a lot of other stuff going on. All of their teammates, all of their classmates are influencing them. So we only have a little bit of influence, but I've never allowed myself to believe that I know better than that kid and that family does about what's best for them. And that's so, I have to trust them to follow their own path. And then it helps my staff and I really focus on just being truth tellers. It's like, this is what's here. And if that's effective in selling the opportunity, I mean, we have had a lot of success and we've got a great institution and a great campus and all of that, telling the truth about, what we have to offer here, there's a lot of good stuff to share.
Yeah, for sure.
But, I just, if I ever felt like, I convinced somebody to come here rather than, rather than getting them excited about the opportunities they would have here, I wouldn't feel good about it, and I'd be worried about that kid the entire
Yeah.
time they
Hard
were
time
here.
sleeping at night.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me ask you
And
this.
that's gonna be different with the way the collegiate athletics is evolving. And if anybody tells you they know how the collegiate athletics is gonna look 2 years from now, they're lying to you. But the way things are evolving and the way that the student athletes are perceiving what collegiate athletics is, so the conversations having and what's true in their minds, all of that stuff is changing. And so thinking in terms of, we're going to have you for 4 years.
Yeah,
That may not even be what they're looking for at this point, just because of what they're seeing and what they're interacting with.
sure.
And, so that is going to have an impact again on how we implement our philosophy and the framing of our values and so on. And that's the challenge that all of us have in the profession is adapting to the new realities and figuring out how to make the impact that, we got into the sport to make, or this profession to make, how we're going to do that in this new evolving environment.
All right, so I got a couple more questions I want to get to here with you.
Okay.
How important is versatility in track and field recruits? Do you look for an athlete who maybe specializes in one specific area? Do you want somebody that does multiple sports? Tell me about that. I
So,
have my own thoughts, but
yeah,
tell
yeah,
me where
yeah.
you're coming
So
from.
All things being equal, the better athlete's going to win. And, so the broader the background of the athlete has, there's probably a better chance they're going to develop farther in any particular event. When you first started asking that question, I was thinking, my head was specifically in the world of track and field and cross country. And it started a little bit when I was at Valpo, but as I've gotten here, the rest of my staff and some of my more event specialist coaches kind of roll their eyes at me because they feel like it's like, well, every athlete I talk to is a heptathlete or a decathlete until I decide otherwise. And a little bit of that has to do with how we see training and our development process and so on. But it is, for me personally, and it's grown out through my staff. There's lots of commonalities. There are a lot of things that movement patterns and physical capabilities that you can translate from one event to another, from one sport to another. I think track and field coaches have generally been a little bit more tuned into that because it's still a significant percentage of my recruits who tell me it's like, yeah, well, I'm really a volleyball player, but I started doing track for conditioning in the spring, and then I decided it's like, well, this really isn't that bad. I kind of like this, and this is now what I want to do. And that's just common story. It's like track and field is nobody's first choice. It's what they do for conditioning until they realize it's not just conditioning.
Right.
So we've always been used to taking athletes from other sports and integrating them into the movement patterns that we need to develop, and building off of those tools. And there's more and more movement back in the other direction now too, where other sports are looking. It's like, what, those track and field coaches are doing something kind of interesting. It's like, it would be nice if our athletes were faster or could jump higher or could, do these other things. And that's kind of what they do all full time. Maybe we should go talk with them about, how to get that done. But again, there's a lot of crossover, from one to the next. It definitely drives our training for our heptathletes and decathletes, but it's also how we kind of organize the training throughout our sprint, hurdles, jumps group and throughout our throws group. We don't, there are definitely programs like, man, you're a discus thrower. You can't throw a shot to save your life. So you're going to be a discus thrower. You're going to spend all your time working on the discus, and we're not going to waste any of that time over in shot put. And I've even had some of my throws coaches who I've hired in here who have kind of leaned in that direction. And by the time they left here, it's like, nope, if you're a thrower, you're a thrower. You do all the throws because they're all good for you. You learn stuff in one area that you couldn't quite figure out in the other. And so you're going to be better as a result. And that's before we even get into the robustness of the athlete, the resistance to injuries and so on and so forth. If you've been doing the same thing your whole life and that one thing your whole life, your body's going to be really, really good at those movement patterns. If you get bounced out of that pattern, you're probably not very well equipped to handle that, and you're more likely to get injured. So, track and field for, generally very linear sport, one foot in front of the other, field sports and stuff, lots of lateral movement and so on. So if all you've done is straight ahead and you step on a rail or step in a hole or something like that, well, that throws your whole body laterally. If your body's not good at moving laterally and handling lateral forces and so on, then that's more likely to hurt you than someone who's used to being out, playing rugby or playing lacrosse or something like that and cutting and jagging and stuff like that. Step in a hole, the ankle doesn't know why it's suddenly at this angle. Am I cutting to move that way or did I step in a hole? Doesn't matter. I'm really good at turning that way and still being able to drive out. So that's just on your injury prevention and your robustness. A more diverse athletic background is preferable. And again, if I'm in a different mode where I've got 10 scholarships to hand out and I've got to find the 10 people who are going to give me the greatest return on investment for those 10 scholarships, I probably spend a lot more time, differentiating between those. If I've got, thrower A who's only ever done track and field and throwing, I've got thrower B who's also done, volleyball and basketball and so on. If I can only take one of them, I'm going to take thrower B that's played basketball and volleyball. I can take them both, so I'll just take them both in my situation and call it good and deal with those individuals as we need to as they develop.
So what's the ideal way for a high school student athlete to get in contact with your program? And then what information should they be sharing as they reach out?
So my niece just graduated um, from college. Ended up playing 4 years of Division II soccer. Played soccer all through high school, much to the family's chagrin, because she was a pretty good runner too. But she was an all-area defender. Her team was state runner-up her freshman year, and always in the tournament and stuff. So high-level player. She really wanted to focus on academics in college. And so she, wasn't really pushing the athletic side, and kind of thought, her picture of what athletics was in college was, well, you're an athlete and then you're allowed to go to class sometimes. And obviously there's a lot of different programs and opportunities than just that.
Yeah.
So it took her a while before she got to the point of, but I really do want to keep playing soccer. And so she talked with me a little bit about, just that question. It was like, well, how do I reach out and so on? And ultimately, God was like, well, you got to reach out to the coach. And so she drafted a letter and so on. I was like, yeah, you got all the right things in there, but they're backwards. Because she started with, here's all the reasons where I'm not sure that I really want to play collegiate soccer because I'm focused on my academics. And down at the bottom is like, by the way, I'm a pretty good soccer player.
Yeah.
And it was like, you want the coach to read the whole letter. So,
Yeah.
put what you've done, put what you're good at up at the front.
Yeah. Front load it. Yeah.
So, and just be thinking in terms of, and this is kind of general advice for interviewing too, is like, instead of going into the interview hoping they'll pick you, go into the interview deciding whether you want that job. So, take that locus of control to yourself and frame how you're going to set up the interactions that way. But you do want to get information from these people, so you do want them to pay attention to you enough to want to share that information.
Sure.
So you need to give them a reason to actually interact with you. So lead with, this is what I'm good at. In the old days, it was hard to get information, and all you knew was the reputation of the university as a whole or whatever, and you had no idea whether Indiana University needed a thrower or how far you had to throw to be considered for a scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
It's all posted now. It's on the internet. It is there. So first thing to do is think about what you want, the kind of environment you want to be in, and so on. Second thing is find the universities, find the schools that generally match up with that, size, region, academic reputations, all those kinds of things. Because, going back a little bit, you're only going to be with your coach and with your coach about 3 hours a day. There's 21 more hours every day,
that are involved.
that you gotta, that needs to work well. Otherwise, that 3 hours isn't going to be enough to balance it. So go through all that, and that'll give you a list of schools to look at. And most of the recruiting services, they've got, a great little form you can go through, type in on this interest, that interest, or whatever, and it'll spit out a whole bunch of school names for you to take a look at. But don't just send a stock form letter. Dear coach, I'm so and so. I'm this tall and I run this fast. Because we get a million of those. But go to their website. There's, the university athletics will have a website. If there's a link in there to a team website or something like that, follow that along. Click all the links in there. Get to know what that program's about. Get to know that coach a little bit. You may find in there's like, well, these are our recruiting standards. This is what we accept for a walk-on. This is what we accept for partial scholarship. This is the level you have to be at to be considered for a full scholarship. So know what those are, so am I presenting myself as a scholarship candidate, or am I presenting myself as really love this school and I'd love to continue my track and field program career, or whatever sport, and okay, so is there a way for me to make that work here? And that's a different letter than if you're, but you need to know those things. I get, again, we're Division III. The number of emails I get asking what what it takes to get a scholarship here. And it would have taken that kid 15 seconds to know that there aren't any. And I get kids who, are wonderful kids, but nowhere near competitive at our level. And there's nobody on a roster that has performances like they have, but they're still, it's like, I think I'd be a great fit for you. If you if you did some research, then you would see probably not. And it's not that, if you're not at that level, don't bother introducing yourself, but know where you stand relative to, what's going on in that program. So you're having the right conversation with that coach rather than forcing the coach to, because it doesn't feel good to tell kids like, I'm sorry, but you're slow.
Yep.
You're not good enough. That's a terrible thing to say to somebody. And it's, for my staff and I, it's entirely counter to our philosophy because, we don't see it's like, well, you're not an end product yet. You're going to get better, but you've put me in a situation where the only way I can respond to you is you're not good enough. And so those are sometimes those end up being the emails that take me longest to write because I don't want to tell a human you're not good enough.
Right.
But that's the position they put me in, so I have to kind of work through and find something that they gave me that I can offer them the hook. It's like, this is how you need to kind of reframe what what you're looking for to get there. So, and to be honest, when I'm busy, those emails get pushed down the list, and I don't get back to them very quickly because there isn't an easy way to answer them. So, and all of us, every collegiate coach is busy. So make sure that you're setting things up. That the conversation you're starting with that coach is appropriate to your situation, and it's easy for them to answer and get that going. Those are going to end up being the most productive starts to the recruiting process.
All right. So I got 3 more questions for you here.
You had
So
2, like five questions ago.
we're pushing it. So now with you guys being Division III, how do you differentiate the D3 experience to recruits who might be considering D1 and D2 opportunities as well?
Again, we just try and share the information. We tell them who we are. We do in our area. There's a pretty heavy D1 bias. D1 is real athletics, and everything else is who knows. So we have to kind of educate through that a little bit. But as I said before, it's like we're very much, this is what we have. We're not trying to sell it. We're explaining it. We're showing it and seeing if that suits you, and then answer all those questions. And we use that as a learning opportunity, not just about our institution and our opportunities, but we try and use that to kind of get the prospects to think about the kinds of questions to be asking other coaches and themselves and so on to work themselves through it. But I mentioned before, it's like there are Division I programs that are championship focused, and they're all the qualities of championship programming is all right there. And there are Division I programs that are very much participatory. They are experience based. That's true at Division II. It's true at Division III. It's true at NAIA. Whatever. At every level, there's going to be a spectrum. It's not like, well, if it's a D1 school, then it's a really, really high quality competitive program, and if it's a D3 school, then it's just about having fun and doing whatever. That's just not the case. So you do need to kind of look through the difference between Division I, Division II, and Division III is the scholarships, which affect some of the other rules, and track and field less so, but in other sports, the day-to-day competition that you're going to be interacting with. If you're a Division I offensive lineman or a Division I outside hitter, going Division III is not going to help you. You're going to stick out, and you're not going to get better because there isn't anyone there good enough to force you to get better.
Yeah.
In track and field, especially when I first got here, it was like all the D1s were coming to our track because we had the best track in the region. So we have Olympians coming here. Grant Holloway, has competed here. Of course, he went to high school just down the road and was coached by one of my alumni. So, but in the world of track and field, I mean, you probably threw against some Olympians even in your college days. I qualified for Division III nationals while getting beat by 70 feet in the javelin, or 80 feet, I think it was. So in our world, it's like there isn't a problem being able to go face elite competition no matter what level you're at. So you still have the opportunity to see that level of competition regardless of the division level that you go to. So there's a little more flexibility with us. But like I said, with other sports, you do need to find the appropriate level so that you're still going to be challenged and have a way to grow yourself.
So do you work with high school coaches during that recruiting process with student athletes? And then if you do, what information are you seeking from them about the students?
Part of it's varied, and I mean I've always been a little bit more student focused. So I send the letters, and this is something that my first year as recruiting coordinator at Pacific Lutheran University, one of my fellow coaches and I we're kind of talking through how do we improve what we're doing and so on. And one of his ideas, one of the many ideas that I've stolen and used ever since, is when we send out our cold letters to introduce our program to kids, we send them to the college counselor at the high school, not to the coach, but to the college counselor. And on one hand, not all coaches are full time in the building, so the college counselor is. So it's, and on top of that, the job of the college counselor is to help the students find colleges to go to. There's lots of motivation for that letter to get passed on to the athlete, and it starts if that conversation has already started between the athlete and the college counselor. We've helped prompt that conversation too.
Sure.
And from that is mostly the interaction with the athlete. Sometimes the coaches will come along on some of the visits, or we'll bump into them and talk with them at meets and so on. I don't make it a priority for me to go do background checks on every single kid coming in. And variety of reasons, but again, we don't see the athlete coming in as a finished project. We know that they're going to grow not just as athletes but as people as well. And how they present as a high school senior is not the same person they're going to be as a college senior. So I have a little bit more bandwidth for how the kid's coming to us. And talking with a coach is like, well, this kid has this trouble, that trouble. Sometimes it's helpful, but that also introduces bias into the
Yeah.
evaluation and the interactions and stuff. So sometimes it's useful. There's some coaches I've gotten to know over the years that we have a pretty good idea what's going on. I do send letters out, recruiting letters out to the coaches, not even so much to specifically, I want to get in contact with this one of your kids, but to share with them the same kinds of things we're sharing with the recruits. It's like, these are the performance levels that we're facing at the conference and national level. So this is what we need to do. We're really good at developing. Here's our here's our sophomore spotlight. This is how the sophomores in each of our event groups are performing now relative to what they did in high school. So you can see the kind of growth
Yeah.
that we're promoting with them, and the academic side of it, and so on, so that they have an idea. So when their athletes go to them and say, well, what do you know about CNU? Then they have a little bit more information to share with it as well. So it is an important relationship to have, but I don't see it as I'm not leveraging the coach to get information about the kids
Hmm.
generally, nor am I leveraging the coach to convince the kid to come to CNU instead of going someplace else.
Sure.
So, but I mean, again, everything's related. The coach is going to have influence. The athlete's teammates are gonna have influence. The parents, their siblings, they're all going to have influence. So all of them get the same honest treatment, and we try to be, we are genuine with it. We try to make sure it comes across as genuine, that we really really are just trying to help the student athletes find their best place. And we love what we're doing here at CNU, and if everything else fits in, then this is going to be great. But if it's you got to go someplace, you're going to be better off someplace else, then we help them with that process as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. So last question I have for you, and I know you think it's going to be who won Super Bowl 40, but it's not. The answer there is the Steelers, in case you were wondering. Anyway, no, the question is,
I don't even remember who they played,
I
because
think it was the Seattle Seahawks, if
last
memory
I heard
serves, but happened to
last
be
I
your
heard the
favorite
Steelers
team.
have been in
So,
the Super Bowl every year. But anyway,
hey, what
go
has
ahead.
been your most memorable moment coaching track and field?
Having having some fresh-faced thrower from Calvin College tell me about someone he met on a bus that happened to be our president's wife, who convinced him to reach out and ask about coaching. To be honest, that actually is I mean, I had uh, one of the first athletes, yeah, one of the first athletes I coached, my first job. It's a sprinter, football player, sprinter, seemed to be pretty fast, but also was completely disinterested, wasn't really doing any of the work that he was being asked. And he came in and decided, like, coach, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go play soccer instead. And the next day, the football coach is in my office getting mad at me for letting this kid go off and play soccer instead of run track, because he needed to get faster and blah, blah, blah. I was like, coach, I probably was going to kick him off the team if he hadn't quit, because he doesn't do any of the work that we're asking him to do. That was his junior year. And he was one of the fastest kids in in the school. Well, we got our 4x1 to states that year with a couple of pole vaulters and a bunch of other people. He knew he was a lot faster. First time the relay had made it to states in I don't know how long or whatever. And he came out for track his senior year and was dialed in, our number one worker, number one competitor, got after it, and really led that group. So that transformation. There was a bunch of other kids on those teams that you could just see that the experience they were having was changing their perspectives. I had went back and coached at my high school alma mater. One of my kids, or one of the kids, and coach introduced me. I still held the triple jump school record and stuff. So he shared that, and I was still competing in the javelin. So we shared that. And then somehow I was coaching the pole vault and high jump. And one of my teammates was a javelin coach, but he was sick early in the season and then was behind at work and stuff, so couldn't come out. So I was in between pole vault and javelin, or pole vault and high jump. I'd stop in with the javelin throwers in the middle of the field and say, hey, do this and this and this, and then go on to the next one and come back and check in with them and so on. They'd forgotten that I was a javelin thrower because kids don't remember anything, so they were just confused why this pole vault coach was trying to tell them how to do in the javelin. And I grabbed a javelin and was like, oh, it's like, yeah. But one of those kids ended up improving by like 15 feet that year and made it onto states. And then, as she was, who this is, as she was, progressing and so on, I got the opportunity to go coach at PLU, and still kept in touch with her and helped her out here and there and so on. Well, then she becomes a recruit and she ends up coming to PLU and have a really good first year. She makes it to nationals, missed finals at nationals because it was the one year that at nationals they only took 8 to finals instead of 9, and she was 9th after prelims. So we got her there, having some good success there, and then the next year I got the job at Valpo and left her behind again. But then after she graduated from PLU, she came out to Indiana and trained and helped coach out there a little bit to continue that and so on. And she's been didn't get a chance to go over to England this summer to go see her and her husband and stuff, but she's family as we go through. So we got those, we got all kinds of kids at Valpo who were one of our throwers there, who you and everybody else were in my office nonstop. This guy kicked this guy off the team. He's lazy. He's a pain in the butt. He doesn't get it. He's never going to do anything. And I was like, no, I'm seeing something. It's like, no, you just gotta. And by the time he was a senior, not only was he one of our top throwers, but he was a team leader. And I get pictures from that graduate group, and they all do summers at a lake house and stuff, and he's right in there with all their families and stuff. So those kinds of things. And it's just and all, it sounds like, well, all these people who ended up being really, really good performance wise, it's like, well, yeah, but that went that's because that went hand in hand with their personal development, their growth, and so on. And so there isn't, there are a lot of good candidates, but there definitely isn't that one that stands out above all the others, just because there's so many different flavors, different circumstances, different situations. And and it's the great thing about now being at this stage of what's been a long career already, is there's lots and lots and lots of those in it, and it fills the cup really well.
Yeah, you're leaving a legacy, that's for sure. So Tyler, thank you for your time today. It has been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you on the podcast here and to talk to you about coaching journey and all the passion that you have for the sport that we both love. So I wish you nothing but the best this coming season and all that you do. Thank you for tuning in today, everyone. Until next time, take care. Goodbye.